when
Coming up
all of
on
a sudden
Unleash
it got
Thyself.
really hard to stay, I had two options. I had to be like, oh, well, this was spirit led, so I have to see it through. That's not trust. That's personal development. That's what personal development has taught us, is that when stuff gets hard, push through the hard. Mm-mm. I truly don't believe that, and I've witnessed it multiple times. Instead, it's like, okay, when you come to this crossroads, what feels easeful?
Welcome to Unleash Thyself, a podcast where we journey into the depths of personal transformation, spirituality, and growth. I'm your host, Konstantin Morun, and today we welcome a dear friend of mine and someone that's been on the show a while back now, Ashley Abramson. Now, Ashley, I don't think you need an introduction, but for those that don't know Ashley, she's one of the most amazing humans you get to meet. She's the voice behind Big Miracle Energy, a beautiful YouTube channel, and she does a lot of amazing things. But what she does best, from my context, from my perspective, is that she listens well and provides such perspective that allows me to go deep within my journey. And today, what we're going to bring to you is a conversation between two friends around our journeys and what we've gotten to uncover over the last few weeks. And I bet you're going to find at least a thing or two that you can take back to your own journey and
Yeah.
continue the beautiful path you're on. So, Ashley, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Well, thank you for that beautiful introduction, Constantine. And yeah, I was one of the first guests on the podcast on
Well,
Unleash Thyself. So, I mean, you just celebrated a year. Well, it's been a bit already, hasn't it? Like, time is flying.
almost
How
a
long?
year and a half now, yeah.
Yeah, you're in it. Oh my gosh, I feel okay. I feel like we just did that year anniversary episode like yesterday, but you're right. It's been like almost 6 months
We did
since.
a 100 episode together, you and I, and then Amy and Joey as
Yeah,
well. So
yeah.
this would be episode one, whatever this, 140 something by the time it comes out, right? So yeah, it's been a while now.
Crazy. Well, I'm super
Yeah,
excited to be here. I mean, if anybody's tuning in, like we go live, or we used to go live very frequently. It's been kind of a gap. We're both in doing some transitions in life and really leaning into trust and flow and not a lot of structure, if you could say, but really releasing the structure of the construct. So, yeah, check some of those out. We've had some really deep, good conversations on YouTube together.
we have, and I'm sure there's more to come. So actually, I mean, you and I haven't really had the chance to sit down and chat for a while now, and I know you're on an adventure, as I am, and everyone else listening, of course. What is, would you say, top of mind for you these days? Like, what has been like an aha moment that you're like, wow, I should have seen this coming, maybe, or it's like it's so big that you can't ignore it anymore?
Mm, trust, trust and surrender, um, and really realizing that that's my only power. That those are my superpowers. That's my only power. And when I do that, everything just looks so beautiful. And it's not that it necessarily changes outside of me, but my perception of it changes. So it's just seamless and flows. But when I'm not trusting and I'm trying to manipulate and create and make things happen a way I believe they need to happen, it's never going to happen that way, but you create such like friction in that process and you delay the inevitable, and you just, it's so much pain and fear and suffering, and the list goes on. But I will say the last, gosh, I don't know, probably since I really came to you and was like, all right, we're going on this, this trust journey. Patrick and I, Patrick's my partner. He's the other half of Big Miracle Energy. Of really leaning into this inspired idea we got one day of like, let's leave the US and head over to Southeast Asia. And it started out as Thailand, and it's kind of morphed more and more, and leaning more into Vietnam and getting a lot of direction. But since I came and told you that, like I keep creating plans. I will say right now, I'm really at a place of surrender, but I kept creating these plans of like, hey, Constantine, we're leaving on this date. We're doing this on this date. And like, so far, I don't think any of those dates have actually happened the way I anticipated, or or the way they were planned. I mean, I had solid plans. I had Airbnbs reserved. I had, visitors coming. We had flights scheduled. And, if anybody's familiar here, I don't know how you can miss it, but with Hurricane Helene and Milton, and just so many things have uprooted us and really have put us on this fast track of, you're going to have to trust and surrender. This is going to be one awful journey, one painful, painful journey. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling, but it's just comical to really look back and reflect. I feel like I've lived a lifetime in the last 3 months, but also a second. It's so crazy because so many things have happened, but so much of it has been spirit aligned. So that, is the moment that time doesn't exist. So then your correlation is really hard to put on there. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
sure, for
in a
sure.
nutshell.
Trust and surrender. Those are words that keep coming up for me every single day, pretty much. And it's one thing I talk a lot about, because it's something that in meditation came to me from my guides, is this idea that the only person that stands in the way of you creating the life you want is you.
Mm,
So how do you get out of your own way? It's through
mm,
trust and surrender. Because
mm,
the more we get in our own way, is because we feel it has to be a certain way. We are the ones in full control when, like you said as well, it's not necessarily the case. I mean, we are kind of the tree in the forest and we don't realize how big the forest is, but we have other elements that influence us and move us.
mm,
And that's becoming more apparent by the day for me.
mhm. Yeah. I think really, yeah, I mean, I think that's been a part of the transition too, of for me, of at least where I'm at on my journey of the trust and surrender, is that it's not about me creating
Yeah.
anymore. It's not about what I think I want. I have no clue what will bring me happiness. So any moment I believe um that I should make plans or goals or um things that will bring me happiness, and like stick to them. Right now, I'm not saying that like I just sit on a park bench and don't do anything, but I think there's a difference of like placing your happiness in this possible outcome because you believe it's there, versus realizing like, yeah, okay, today I feel like we're going to end up in Thailand. I've got a hotel in November booked, but honestly, I don't really know if I'm gonna be there. But, like, I made this plan because I felt inspired to make this plan, just like I felt inspired to stay an additional month in Florida, but it didn't happen. So it's really this surrender of seeing how I brought this up to you about your first retreat coming up. You have an amazing
Mhm.
lineup of people for the second retreat, but the first retreat, you're still kind of working through. And I was like, Constantine, maybe the first one isn't supposed to happen. Maybe that wasn't what it was meant to be a part. Maybe it was the whole, like who knows? Like you could say it was just the planning or what inspiration it brought you for the second retreat. And I think that's really a place I'm leaning into, is that when something starts, it doesn't necessarily mean the completion looks the way I think the completion looks, which means actually happening or happening in a certain manner. And I think it goes to the statement that you love that I added on to, of like, we have no business with the means or the outcome. we're
Yeah, the
just
whole
we're
of
just
yeah.
here to trust and to be guided and to really practice every single day unraveling from the fear that the ego has us in, so that whatever is happening outside of us, our perception can be that of love. We can see the love in everything, always.
Yeah, and I love that. I mean, you brought up the retreat as well, right? And one outcome could be it doesn't happen. And I actually had to wrestle with that idea the last couple of weeks, and I'm past that point to the idea that when this idea of the retreat came to me, it was all spirit led, right? It came in meditation, in my shamanic journeys. I was given the blueprint, even the dates. Everything was very divinely aligned, to the point that even the location that we found and how quickly it was found and booked and how spiritually aligned it was.
Mhm.
And from the day one, when they came through, it came through with a message of trust. It's like, trust, everything will be okay, exactly as it's supposed to be. And of course, then we get in the way, or I got in the way, and I'm like, well, I have some ideas of how I would like this to be. And
Mhm.
of course, as life would have it, some of those things came through, some of those things did not necessarily
Mhm.
align. And even, they aligned, but not with the timeline I had in mind, perhaps.
Mhm.
And as I was wrestling with this idea, right, and then I had many people in my life telling me, it's like, oh, maybe you should just postpone it. You should, because I have the other one now booked in March, and we have lots of people for that. And we still have quite a few people for this one, funny enough. And people are like, well, maybe you should cancel it, you should book it, or push it out, and then, you'll do it. And the more I sat with that, the more the messages I was receiving is like, you can. I mean, nothing stops. It's your choice. But then what do we talk about trust? Because if you're saying, in my case, I trust and I surrender, but then halfway through I get in the way and say, well, it's not showing up the way I wanted, so now I'm not going to trust anymore. I'm just going to cancel it. That's pretty much, for me, it would be me stepping outside of my integrity with my spiritual path,
Mhm.
with the gifts I have to communicate with my angelic and shamanic guides, with my ability to go deep in meditation and shamanic journeys and get these answers. And then I'm like, I'm bringing them back, and I'm like, well, I'll pick this one and I'll pick this one, but those, nah, that's a bit too hard.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's been a huge lesson for me. It's like you said, the outcome, the more we detach from it, yeah, it might be that it doesn't happen, because you never know what happens it's in a month from now, at the time of the recording. You don't know what happens. But I'm open now to whatever happens. I know will be in my highest interest. And the way it's planned out right now, it's nothing like how it appeared initially.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think a key point is that trust, again, doesn't mean a specific outcome, and uh, that it necessarily has to turn out that way. Trust is at any given moment when there's a crossroads, you lean into the ease. And when I say ease isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it's, taking those moments and having to cancel something like I did in Florida. I had to cancel my son's trip. And that was like the most spirit guided thing that I had seen in a long time. Like, the way our Airbnb got booked and how there was a glitch in the computer. I think I actually did it. You and I did a conversation about it, about how, like, we wanted this Airbnb, but it was, $1,000 over our budget. And then there was like this glitch in the computer, and we ended up getting like $1,700 off. And it was just like so aligned in my son's flight and everything else. And when all of a sudden it got really hard to stay, I had 2 options. I had to be like, "Oh, well, this was spirit led, so I have to see it through." That's not trust. That's personal development. That's what personal development has taught us, is that when stuff gets hard, push through the hard. Mm-mm. I truly don't believe that, and I've witnessed it multiple times. Instead, it's like, okay, when you come to this crossroads, what feels easeful? What feels like the lightest opportunity, not the opportunity to build extra, layers on your armor and to become stronger, but instead what just feels easeful. And as difficult and discomfort it was to say, "Hey son, you can't come. Hey, we're leaving Florida in, less than 8 hours, and I haven't even said bye to my friends, and I don't know if I'm ever coming back. I don't know what Florida's going to look like if we ever come back." That was super uncomfortable, but it was easeful. The second I made that decision, like, things just aligned. Boom, 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 boom. And it was like just things were just happening, and I was just taking part in this and just witnessing from this, like, observatory place of just love and being held and really comfort. And I think for me that's probably been one of the hardest things with trust and surrender, is that, especially, I'm a person is like, I used to say, you stick to your word, period. Like, and I hated if people showed up late. Like, I was really rigid about, like, your word
Mhm.
is worth the weight in gold. Like, if you say you're going to be somewhere, you be there. If you're going to show up somewhere, there's only two options: on time doesn't count. It's 10 minutes early. That is the only amount, like, or a half hour early, right? Like, on time is not even existent. Like, you have to be early, and late, oh geez, that is awful. And to me, that was me needing to seek control in this just chaotic environment of ego and fear, and I was trying to grasp onto something. And that was one of the things too with like the trust was like, okay, I trust at the beginning, so I must see this through. That again was me grasping onto control instead of when I'm at a crossroads being like, okay, what feels easeful, what feels easeful.
Yeah. Hey, it's Constantine here, and I want to take a brief moment to truly thank you for being a part of this incredible journey of transformation. You are the reason we are creating this content. I see you and I appreciate you. Your support truly means the world to me. I want to ask you for a small favor. I'd love for you to join our mission by hitting like, subscribe, or leaving a thoughtful comment or review. Your engagement helps others discover these insights, and together we can continue to unlock the power of authenticity and personal transformation. Thank you for being a part of this movement. Now, back to the episode. Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, this whole idea of dropping into the body and feeling, and letting intuition come in and play. And I mean, I resonate with everything you said, for sure, for sure. And I feel like there's also the slippery slope, like, because I had some heaviness in some of the stuff you said, and how it reflected back for me. But there's a slippery slope of saying, that then falling back into like, oh yeah, this is not meant to work out, and then throwing up your arms in the air and being like, I give up, and whatever, I'm not even going to make plans anymore, right? And I feel like there's such an opportunity for that to happen. It's like, oh, I've tried to make this great thing happen, and it's not happening, so I don't even know what to believe anymore, and that's it. And I've been there myself many times, right? And it's the idea that, yes, sometimes it may not happen the way you envisioned it. Sometimes it may not happen at all, because it wasn't about it happening. It was about the journey it was taking you on. And it's that discernment that I feel becomes in with this ease that you mentioned. Because the more ease you bring in into the discernment, the more clear it becomes as to what the path might be.
Yeah, I think the ease is really a place that you begin to find most when you begin to live in the present moment, because then it's really not weighing what the possible outcomes are, right? So if you're just in the present moment, like this morning example, which don't get me wrong, like I grappled as well, because this is still a journey for me. This is still a practice. But I woke up and I just was like, I don't feel like working out today. It doesn't feel easeful. And then the ego came in. It was like, okay. So now you're not going to work out. And then tomorrow you're not going to work out. And the next day you're not going to work out. And all those stories of shame and guilt from the ego came in. And I had to stop and take a step back and be like, nah. We don't live in the past and we don't live in the future anymore. We live in the present moment. And right now, what feels easeful is for me to lay on this bed, cuddled up, and to not go work out right now. And that is okay. But the second you allow yourself to get into the future or the past is the moments that the ease can't exist, because you're in the ego immediately. So for me, ease is easiest to find when you relinquish the outcome, when you relinquish what would happen in the future, and you really try to not even think about the past either, but to just really sit in like, what feels easeful right now. And for me, it's not necessarily dropping into my body. It's just, it's going into the mind, of what feels less chaotic, what has less stories, what is just really simple in the moment, to be like, I'm not going to work out. Like that was what came to me this morning. It was like, I'm not going to, it wasn't this ego grapple of laying in bed and being like, I don't want to work out. Oh my gosh. Like there was no stories. It just was a matter of fact, this is what's happening today. And then the stories came in. But yeah, I feel like for me, that's the moments of finding the ease, is when I really relinquish any future destination. And that's why I say, like, yeah, we have stuff scheduled for Thailand. I don't know. I talked to one of my mentors, David Hoffmeister, the other day, and I was telling him about the journeys we've been on and where we're at. And he's like, you're doing a really good job trusting. I was like, yeah, I really realized in the shower the other morning, like, my only power is my perception. Like everything outside of me, no matter how much I think I'm in control of it, is BS. I'm not. Like, literally, when I ask spirit to guide my day, it's not about spirit or Jesus or, whoever you're talking to help you walk you through this. It's not about them making sure your actions at the level of form look a certain way. It's that they help you see whatever the heck is going on in this beautiful, loving way, no matter
Yeah.
what your body is doing, no matter what the body next to you is doing, no matter what, anything. And I was like, man. And then I yelled to Patrick. I was like, Patrick, come here. He's like, what? And I was like, we were always going to leave Florida, weren't we? And he just laughed. And I'm like, it didn't matter. It was either we were leaving with me and my feet kicking and me screaming and me being in conflict in my mind, or the way it did happen, which was me surrendering. It was this most beautiful drive of 9 hours. And yeah, but that has been pretty miraculous, I would say.
Yeah, it has been. I mean, oof, yeah. The journey of releasing control,
Yeah.
surrendering, trusting. I mean, that's honestly like, I think you and I talked about this a lot, but the word for me for the last almost 24 months now has been trust. But it had so many layers and it's still unpacking. And the more I go down this path, the more I realize how much illusion that is out there of how what we have control over and what we want to control, and from like how something plays out to the outcomes of it, to what brings us joy or not, or fulfillment or happiness, and all of it. It's really, really interesting. And more importantly, how much of that is actually swayed by the opinion of others, and essentially the indoctrination that happens through the systems that we get to be part of, willingly or unwillingly. And I mean, to me, it makes sense as to why that is so frowned upon for one to do this inner work, to go within, because once you do, I mean, you can't put a genie back in the bottle. And of course, anyone listening to this podcast right now, or anything else that you and I do, would be on a similar path where you realize that the more you go within, the more answers you find, versus the more you go without, outside of you, the less ease and the more pain you find. So it's actually
Mhm.
very, very interesting when you see with it.
Mhm. But yeah, we're like, the whole society is set up to chase those external things, and people it's just like one shiny thing after another, right? Like, you're in a marriage and your marriage is not happy, so then you chase money, and then money isn't, and so then you find, like, it's this constant, let me see if this is where the happiness is, let me see if this is where the happiness is, let me see if this. And it's because it's all just a projection of your own internal state of being. And if, instead of you seeing it as something outside of you, but actually something within you showing you a piece of what's going on within, like, that is how you begin to unpack the layers. um and it's just it's crazy how tied we are to even, like, material things. You and I talked briefly about that when I got rid of my car, and that's just been even more and more. And with the hurricanes, I've seen, like, so much. There's so much pain and suffering, in in a lot of his loss of things, right? Because
Yeah.
people thought security was in their things.
I mean, the illusion is strong for that. I mean, let's be honest. Like, people lost everything, right? That they consider, but they didn't lose their lives.
Mhm.
Which, to me, now that I think about it, right? Like, it's that one is taken for granted, perhaps, and one shouldn't, right? Like, let's put it out there. And then I'm curious to see like where you take this, because it's like, yeah, you lose the things, but if you lose everything that you worked for, let's say for 30 years, 40 years of your life, I mean, that's a huge hit to your material side of things, to your
Mhm.
ego, to your mind, to all that you are, if you are not able to be also on a spiritual path at the same time, to realize that no matter what happens outside of you, you are okay.
Yeah. um I mean, this is probably not going to be favored by many, but ultimately it's a reflection of what's going on within. So when you lose these things, or you're in a place, of grand devastation, and you're receiving it that way, right? Because I know people that there. I was talking to a friend the other day, and I was like, it's so crazy that Patrick and I planned to leave Florida. Like, we've been there 3 years, right? And we go to the beach every Sunday. You know that, Constantine. Anybody who
Yep.
watches our lives knows we go every Sunday. And then literally, like the week before our lease was up, granted, we were supposed to stay another month in an Airbnb, all of the beaches are just like taken out, and how like sad that was. But my friend was saying, like, to someone else that may seem as like this beautiful opportunity for regrowth and rebirth. So it's all about how you receive it, and then looking at it as a forgiveness opportunity. That literally everything here only has two purposes. One is forgiveness, and the other is to be an extension of love. And so it's really an opportunity to see that, in fact, like, all of these things were never what you thought they were. I mean, I hate to say, but they never were what you had created them to be, to fill these holes within, to represent something that you're not willing to look at within. And do not get me wrong, like, I have a video, I haven't dropped any new videos lately, but I will tell you, Patrick and I have been recording videos like crazy, vlogging so much. I just haven't, I'll have to ask you,
Yeah.
Constantine, later, how where do I start? But I did a video when all of a sudden we realized we had to leave Florida. We still had some creature comforts with us to go to the Airbnb, like extra clothing, this or that. And we had a month to really pare down to our only a carry on and a backpack. That's what we're going to live out of for the next year. And so my mind, I had a month, right? That was my thought. I had a month. So I had all these extra things. And then all of a sudden, Patrick tells me at kind of breaks it to me at like what was it, 1 p.m. or something, and he's like, we gotta go. And I was like, what? Mind you, he's meaning like at 3 o'clock in the morning, like less than 24 hours later, we gotta go. And 14 hours later, and I had Lighthouse coming up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, and I just had this huge meltdown. And I did a video because at that moment I had to go through everything, Constantine. I had to literally get myself from boxes of clothing and stuff I thought I could still figure out which I wanted to bring or didn't want to bring or whatever, into a carry-on and a backpack in a matter of like 30 minutes before I had my Lighthouse call and before I had to do all these other things. And I just broke down. All of a sudden I realized how much I still projected into these things, and how much safety and shame and guilt was actually hiding behind them. And I had hit record just to record myself, like, showing like, oh my gosh, I can actually pare down to just a carry on. And I broke down. I just like tears, shedding, and all this. And I just realized so much was tied to these things and the place of Florida and the people that were there. Um, and yeah, so it was never about the things. It was never about the people. It was never about the place. It was always about the shame and guilt I hid behind those things. And it came out, and
Mhm.
I had two options: shove it back in, or to allow it to come out and to be the observer and to allow it to release. And yeah, I don't know how I got on that tangent.
It's I mean, it brought a couple of things up for me. I mean, I remember 7 years ago when I moved to where I'm right now. I mean, I moved in a car and, well, an SUV, and then that's it. It was like a 17-hour drive. I didn't take much with me, and then I rebuilt everything in a way. And then, of course, I accumulated way too much stuff at some point, and kind of paring down. But I was just thinking, like, if I had to leave this place on a short notice, like, what would I take with me?
Mhm.
And of course, I have my computer, my laptops, my altar, things like, stones and things like I value, and then things that I never pay attention to or use, but also hold like some significance to me. And it's really interesting, right? Because as you're talking about it, I'm like, well, how much of these things are actually me versus none of them? And it's really
Mhm.
like, if I didn't have a chance to come back to any of this stuff here, yeah, I mean, I would feel heartbroken in a way, but I would still be me. And that's the story I've been having to unpack for the last 2 months. The story of enoughness. When are we enough? So, like, you as an individual, like, when do you feel like you are enough? You have enough. You do enough. You get enough. You receive enough. And I feel that's what this is touching on for me, because it got me to really contemplate like I really don't want to lose any of this stuff because it's allowing me to do this recording with you, and it's allowing me to have comforts and all these things. And then you imagine how many people have had to go through losses like this, and they came out stronger than ever before, and some haven't.
Mm.
Right. And I look at you, like you guys had to leave behind quite a bit, having to run away from the hurricanes, and so did many other people, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
It's really
I think
powerful.
one thing I've learned is how much you don't actually need. And it is what you're saying, it's more the stories behind it. Because, like, at one point when we had to leave for the first hurricane and evacuate, and we were still in Florida, we went to our apartment that was empty. And so, like, we were trying to cook and eat and do all these things and had to be very creative because there was like nothing there. There was just like the tiny amount of stuff we had brought with us in that moment. And that really taught me how much I think I need because of the stories. And since we've been here, there's been things that have come up where I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't bring this with. And then I would ask myself, well, why would you need that? And then I was like, well, because so and so bought it for me and that was really nice of them. And it's like, but that's not that, like, you don't need that. Like, that is because you have a story and you have shame and guilt tied to it if you don't like bring it with, right? If you don't have it with you. Um yeah. Yeah.
Very
Mm.
interesting. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Hmm. I mean, that code goes back to trust as well, actually, and surrender. Like it's the same theme. Because if you trust you are enough, you have enough as you are, then
Mhm.
everything outside of you just becomes an extra benefit and a bonus, right? Like if I have all these things, great. If I don't have them, that's fine too.
Mhm.
And I wonder, in the way the society is built today, like that's definitely not how
Mm-mm.
anyone says it. Like even myself, like I was here on this path, and like you had to go through it, and everyone else, because it's a culture of consumerism, right? And having getting more and getting more and getting more
Scarcity.
scarcity too, right? Yeah, exactly. And it's very intriguing to say the least.
Yeah, it's the opposite. Like, I mean, when we really surrender fully, eh, if we really step into surrender and trust to whatever you think it is, whether it's Buddha, Jesus, God, spirit, divine, whatever's out there that you're surrendering and trusting, when you really know that with all of your being and your mind, is when you know you're abundant, like that you are wholly abundant and you have like it's not that you have all, but you're just fully abundant and therefore you have no reason to need anything, right? So it means I don't need love from you, I don't need food, I don't need clothing, I don't need any of these things. Like, if we think into the Bible, and by no means am I religious or anything, but there is some great stories in the Bible that I think play out some of this. And one of them is the garden. In the garden, Adam and Eve were naked until they ate from the tree of, and no one quote me on this by any means, what was it, the tree of evil or whatever. And when they
Your
did, they
knowledge, I think it
realized
was, right?
the tree of what? Knowledge, the
Knowledge.
tree of knowledge, yes, which is the tree of duality. It's the tree that duality we live in, where there's black, there's white, there's right, there's wrong, there's this, there's that. So prior to that, they didn't realize they were naked because they were one. It was this oneness, it was this all encompassing, holy, abundant love. And when they ate from the tree of knowledge, is when they experienced duality and all of a sudden covered themselves with leaves and things because they saw the differences. They saw the duality and were able to see that, they had created separation and stuff. So when we go back to that place of the holy abundance, we see no difference between me or you or this or that, and we see that
Yeah.
we are all. And when you're all, you have all, you are all. Like, there, it just is.
Um, well, perspective to have, because the more you get to release that, the easier it becomes, because you release attachment to a lot of different things. Now, it's a process. I've been going through so much of it myself, and it's kind of like you said, peeling back the layers one at a time, and it's like, okay,
Mhm.
what's next?
Yeah. And it's being open to really honoring it, and I mean the observer seat more and more, sitting in that and in just trusting in the observer seat, I think, is a big piece, right? Because the observer seat is where you realize, like, you're not going to stop some of these thoughts or emotions or reactions, but the question is, are you going to allow them to create more shame and guilt, or are you going to identify with them as that is you, or are you going to just see them for what they are, which is, the ego's tactics of fear that need to come out, that need to be free so that the light can shine through, right? If we're covered in
Yeah,
darkness, the light can't shine. You can't be the lighthouse. I have a friend, it was a couple weeks ago, she called me and was like, I'm having some of the darkest thoughts. I'm like, who am I? Like, what is this? And really, that is a part of the shedding, is like, it's not that you've never had these thoughts, you've just shoved them in, so they're just sitting in there. And when you start to do this work, this, Constantine, and you start to remove the layers, these freaked out, like, dark thoughts come up, and it's scary because you are like, this isn't me, why am I thinking this? Like, I don't want to think this. But in that moment, you have two options: to shove it back down where it's always been, or to see it for what it is. Like, I can shove it down and it's still a thought, or I can let it out and it can, like, go to the light. It can be the darkness, be brought to the light, and to not allow it to provoke more fear or identification. Because let's be honest, if that thought is coming forward, it's there, period. Like, you shoving it down does not negate that you have that thought within.
yes, 100%. And I love that you brought it up. I mean, like, what comes to me here is like this idea of facing fears, right? Pain is a form of fear, but let's say fears, right? Like, what are the ways one can face them? And I can kind of see three ways. It's not kind of, I see three ways, right? You can face fear by running away from it. So that's shoving it down, turning your back and chasing an exit of sorts or a distraction of sorts. You can face fear head on with more fear, which we have plenty of examples in our life of doing that, right? Like, getting into an argument with someone you love. That's fear fighting fear, essentially, right?
Mhm.
And then there's the idea of what you just shared as well. It's like facing fear with love, meaning like you just observe, get curious, ask questions, and not bring any guilt, blame, shame into it or judgment. And that's a tough one. That part is tough. But I feel it's also easier than most people think it is, including myself.
Yeah.
And, only one of those options will lead you to clearing the illusion of the fear.
Mm,
Because fears, we know they're illusions. But like any illusion, if it's a good illusion, it's going to appear real until you step through it and you see
mm,
it for what it is.
mhm. Yeah. I think for me, you're right, only one of those works. And well, actually, let's not say works, because let's be honest, the first two you mentioned, they may feel good in the moment. It
Yeah.
may feel like it worked in the moment, but you and I both know it finds a different way to come out then. Like, maybe a month later, maybe a year later, maybe 2 seconds later, but it's going to manifest itself in a different way. And to me, it's when you sit in the observer, it's almost like fear doesn't exist anymore. So, granted, this fear is coming up, we would label it a fear. But when you sit as the observer who's wholly perfect and only love, it becomes comical. Like, literally, it's like, what the heck is this? And you laugh at it, because to me, when I started being able to laugh at some of these things, is when I realized how much I'm actually seeing it for what it is, which is a made up story, right? Fear is only a made up story ever. That's why your fears are different than my fears are different than their fears and their fears, like, look at the fears you have. I'll bet you a lot of them actually came from your parents, observing them. It was
Of
probably
course,
their
yeah.
fears, and so on and so forth. So it reiterates this narrative that it's a perspective. It's a perspective, and I know that that's my superpower, is my perception. And how I activate that superpower is I allow the other perception, the perception of fear, to come to the light, right? I don't go digging in the darkness for this junk. When it starts to arise, which it will, right? Don't get me, like, you don't need to go digging for anything, friends. It will come up. And when you go digging, that is an awful that is a place that I have been before. It's a lot of shadow work and things like that, which, to each their own. But what I'm saying is, it is not necessary. You do not need to go spelunking or cave diving into the shadows and experience that additional pain, because it will come up. And when it comes up on its own, is super beautiful opportunity to not have to suffer, to not have to experience it, but to see it from the observer standpoint. Um, and then it's brought to the light, and you hand it over to spirit, right? Like, that's when I'm like, hey, spirit, help me see this differently. And I ask for the miracle. And whether it looks like the miracle I think I should be getting, right? Like, that's just another trick of the ego. I know it's happening, because I'm open to shifting my perspective, and that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what it looks like at the level of form, right? It's about
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
at the level of what you're sharing.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of the story. I mean, I shared this with you already, and some people may know it, but with my dislike for cold water, that turned to be a fear. And it
Mm-hmm.
turned to be a fear that not inherited, but I just took on from someone in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I was able to, instead of running away from it and trying to fight it with more fear, that I actually embraced it and said, okay, well, what's here? Why is this coming up? What's causing this? And then
Yeah.
when it showed what it was causing, it's like, oh, okay. I was
Mm-hmm.
just releasing it. And it was like, I couldn't believe in the moment. And still to this day, I can't believe how easy it can be once you shift the perspective and approach it from a different angle and
Yeah.
ask better questions. I guess that's the thing that comes up for me. It's like, how do we get to ask better questions of
Yeah.
ourselves?
Well, and it's not even like, I don't know. For me, I've found that you don't even have to ask questions anymore and figure it out. For me, it's more of just this, like, why do I feel like I need to know? And a lot of times the responses to that is because the ego wants me to know. Um, because there's been many moments that I've released things without knowing. Not that things don't come forward, like with your water thing, it just came to you. It came out of this place, like out of nowhere. You're like, oh, that's what it was, with the story with your mom and stuff. But I think, again, like, I think people tend to believe that they can't release something if they don't know the story behind it. And so I guess that's what I'm bringing forward, is that you fully can release things without knowing the story. And that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of handing over to spirit, because spirit, or your guides, or Jesus or God, can see the whole picture. So it knows exactly what tile it fits in, and you don't have to be the one to figure that out. Because let's be honest, I don't remember all my lifetimes. I don't know if you do, Constantine, right? And it could take decades, if not never, for me to remember where this fear came from. And if I'm saying I can't release it until I remember it, then that's really not helpful.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story earlier on in my shamanic path. I was doing a journey, and there were many at the point there were many parts that were being, or many of these stories that were being revealed and then healed and brought, those parts of me brought back to me. In the shamanic world, it's called a soul retrieval. And there was this particular instance that, as I was journeying with my guides, they're like, we can't show you this, you're not ready to see this, but it can be cleared. But in that moment, now that you mentioned, I realized that I was not having any of it. I'm like, no, I need to know. and I wasn't really being open to the healing aspect of it. Anyway, long story short, I was able to reach out to another shaman friend of mine, and he did the soul retrieval on my behalf, which is something, again, shamans can do. And he was able to heal that part, but he also did not get to see what it was that he was healing. He just knew that he went in and was able to heal that and bring that back to me. And that was that release of, like, in that moment, as he did that, I had no desire to know the details anymore. I knew some of the context maybe, but none of the details. And, like, to your point, you don't need to see it to be able to release it, or rather, not need to see the details. However, I do feel like you you need to become aware of the situation to be able to release it.
Hmm.
Not at the details, but like the situation per se. It's like, okay, I have a money story that's not conducive to my highest self and my growth. Well, I know I need to go, or I get to release that. Do I need to know all the pieces of it? Probably not. But do I need to know that it's there? I would say yes. So then it gives you opportunity to actually release. Maybe it's not the case, but that's how I see it right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, it's just when I feel irritation or, any of those negative emotions. And sometimes I can say it's tied to, like you said, a money story. That's a common thing you and I have conversations about a lot. I mean, is oh my gosh, I was having a conversation with a friend the other day. Uh, Money is just like this massive construct on top of on top of a ton of constructs to keep us stuck, and it does an absolutely beautiful job. But for me, it's just like that discomfort and then handing it over. And, sometimes if there's a story, great. If there's not, great. But that's really where I'm at. I'm really just like, anytime I start to feel agitated, irritated, really in my body, I'm like, ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Spirit, I want to shift in perspective.
Yeah,
Here you
and
go.
I know we want to record the, like, kind of two episodes. So I love that you brought the money story because I want to dive into that, but I feel like that's going to be a completely separate episode here. So we're going to say goodbye to our beautiful audience, and you and I will stick on
Bye.
and record that part because that's going to be cool. And yeah, so see us next week probably on this next part. It's going to be powerful. So thank you for being here. We'll be in touch. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of personal transformation. Your presence and engagement are at the heart of what we do, and I sincerely appreciate you, your time, and thirst for knowledge, inspiration, and empowerment. Please consider showing your support by hitting like, subscribe, leaving a comment, or writing a review. Your engagement not only fuels our mission, but also helps others discover these insights. For more daily guidance on personal transformation across the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical realms, be sure to visit our website at unleashthyself.com. You can also find us on Instagram at Unleash Thyself Today, TikTok and YouTube at Unleash Thyself, and there we post daily content designed to inspire and empower you on your journey. If you have any specific thoughts, questions, or feedback, I truly value your input. I would love to hear from you. Together, we're building a community united in authenticity and purpose. Once again, thank you for being a part of this movement. Until next time, continue to embrace your true self and live a life on purpose with purpose. See you in the next episode.